Welcome to Sabbath Collective, a community of people interested in celebrating the Sabbath and pursuing God through a Hebraic worldview of the Bible. So we are now in a series called Losing Church and Finding God. And this has been kind of an interesting series to go through. We're talking about ways and places that we can connect to God that are outside of the Western church paradox. And today we're going to look at something really exciting and different about a place to find God, and that is in nature. And we're in a very interesting place to be able to do that. Have you ever felt connected to God in nature? Hey, Sissy, good to see you. Phoebe, great to see you. Shabbat Shalom. I am in Taiwan now, and I am joining my son and very pregnant daughter-in-law for the birth of their daughter. And behind me, you can't really see them because it's so misty outside, but are these beautiful mountains. And certainly Taiwan is a place where you can connect to nature. Shabbat Shalom, good to see you. So have you ever felt really close to God in nature? Most of us have experienced this sense of His presence, maybe while standing at the base of a mountain or sitting in a garden or breathing in the salt air of the ocean while your toes are grounded in the sand. David actually wrote about finding God in nature in Psalm 19, and he gave this to his choir director to be sung. And so tonight we're not using our Mevo, which is our standard device that we use for this. We're using my phone, so I'm not going to be able to zoom in on these cards. But if you have a device that you can look at, maybe studylight.org or some of the other ones, I use the complete Jewish version. I'm going to read this text, and you can either follow along with me or just listen and maybe pick it up later and read it for yourself. Psalm 19, 1 through 6 says, "For the leader, a psalm of David. The heavens declare the glory of God. The dome of the sky speaks the work of His hands. Every day it utters speech. Every night it reveals knowledge. Without speech, without a word, without their voices being heard, their line goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them He places a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom from the bridal chamber, with delight like an athlete to run his race. It rises at one side of the sky, circles around to the other side, and nothing escapes its heat." And again, I encourage you to go and read this text even after our time together. C.S. Lewis said of this psalm, Psalm 19, "I take this to be the greatest poem in the Psalter and one of the greatest lyrics in the world." So how is David describing that in nature we see God's glory? Well, he says here, the heavens declare the glory of God. The dome of the sky speaks the works of His hands. And David begins with the focus on the heavens, possibly because the heavens are the most universally seen of all God's works. You can also see God's glory in mountains and oceans and in jungles, but not everyone who lives on the earth will see an ocean or a mountain or be in a jungle. And so this heavens speaks to everyone on earth. We all look up at the same sky. There's not a Christian sky where God is seen to only Christians. There's only one sky, and God is seen by all who look at it. David describes the skies as the work of God's hands. I recently bought my son Ryan, who's soon to become a father any day now, a pendant with the Hebrew letter Tav, which symbolizes the sign of the covenant, since now he's really coming into a new covenant with a baby. The pendant was actually made by an ancient artisan process where brass is poured into wax. And on this pendant, you can not only see the personality of the artist in the design, But you can also see little tiny fingerprints of the artist in the piece. You will always be able to see something of the artist in his or her creative works. And so you can see something of Adonai in his creations. The brilliance, the design, the rhythm, the colors, all speak to the artist's personality, the mind, and the heart. Dante Alighieri said, "Nature is the art of God." The heavens reveal a knowledge of Adonai to man. And David writes this, and really in a very beautiful and expressive way. And I think it's so powerful that he wrote it in order to be sung. Every day it utters speech. Every night it reveals knowledge without speech, without a word, without their voices being heard. Their line goes out through all the earth and their words to the end of the world. Line means measuring cord. So what does this reference of voices without words and a measuring line that brings their message to the world means? Have you ever read this kind of Psalms language and said, it's really beautiful, but what exactly does it mean? So when David talks about the lines that go out through all the earth and their words to the end of the world, and then he says without their voices being heard, what does that mean? What does this reference of voices without words and measuring line, what does that mean? Well, the Targums of amplified explanations of Hebrew scriptures into Aramaic give us a clue into that. The Targums translate this as its translation is the 10th chord of utterances. And Isaiah actually uses the same word in chapter 28 when he talks about line upon line. So the nuance here is actually the 10th chord is a line of utterances of silent words. That's so beautiful, right? It's a line of utterances, a line that goes out, but it's using silent words. The very heavens declare the glory of the Lord with silent words. And the creation of the lines coming from heaven erects a tent whose lines are the audible utterances of glory from heaven. So let your creative imagination kind of encircle that thought. Leonard Cohen's lyrics, there's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in. This is a very nuanced thought, and it's really one of my favorite lyrics of all of his songs. But nature is actually full of cracks that let the light in. And we oftentimes look away from cracks. We don't look deeply into them. But the deeper things going on under the surface in nature, if you look through the crack, you'll see the light. Judaism refers to obvious miracles, and they use the term open miracles, like the miracles that occurred at the time of Exodus, or those performed by Elisha. A sea turns into dry land, the dead are returned to life. That they're referred to as open miracles. You can see them, they're obvious. The Ramban from the 13th century says, obvious or open miracles are not an end in themselves. He suggests that the entire point of open miracles, these obvious miracles that God has done and does, the whole point of them is so that afterwards we should look into the wonders of our own life and say, oh, I recognize these. These too are miracles. We look through the cracks to see the light. Ramban calls these everyday wonders hidden miracles. Those times in the story when water remains water and the dead remain dead, when every pattern of nature goes on in the same way, yet when all is said and done, something unexpected has emerged, something that looks suspiciously deliberate. And these are referred to as hidden miracles. That's the story of Purim, really, with Esther, right? There's a hidden miracle there. So the sun will shine, rain will fall and water the earth, but not due to a randomness. When you see the light through the cracks, you'll see the hidden miracles of design. But we have to know what we're looking for. The Midrash says, every day miracles befall a person as great as the miracles of the Exodus. Which is actually why 3 times a day Jewish people say a prayer that says thank you. And they say this, your miracles every day with us, and your wonders and favors at every moment, evening, morning, and afternoon. So they take the time to acknowledge the hidden miracles. Tiny cracks are everywhere in nature. They are miracles, even though they may be hidden, because they are not merely a system. And this is really important to recognize. The word ecosystem can be related to in an unhealthy way sometimes. Nature is not a system as we know it. Usually when we use that word system, we think of government system, right? Nature is a relationship. And you don't have a relationship with a system. A relationship requires care and love and honor. And yes, it has a flow to it. But it is very much a relationship. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi says, the nature of a thing is, and listen to this because this is really deep and beautiful. The nature of a thing is not an event that occurs to it, but properties it holds on its own, and life breathes from within. Isn't that beautiful? That's what nature is. He says that nature is not an idol. Sometimes Christians get freaked out about, hey Josh, good to see you. Great to have you join us. Shabbat Shalom. He says that sometimes, he doesn't say, I'm saying, that sometimes Christians can get freaked out when we talk about nature and they say, oh, well, it's not a God, it's not an idol. But this rabbi says that nature is not an idol as long as we are mindful that every being is endowed with its particular nature by the Creator who designed it. Paul says in Romans 1:20, for ever since the creation of the universe, his invisible qualities, both his eternal power and his divine nature, have been clearly seen because they can be understood from what he has made. So here Paul is actually putting it the same way that David has. The declaring of God through nature is continuous. It's the Hebrew. In the Hebrew, they are all participles expressing continuous action. The heavens are declaring is a better translation. The skies are proclaiming the work of his hands. It's happening every moment, every day, and every night. It's a continuous revealing of the Lord. And it's going on all around us, right? We just need to be aware. Like so many things, we can miss the hidden miracles. The Hebraic phrase means to bubble up and to overflow. And literally, it means to gush in an uncontrollable manner. So it's kind of like a geyser. In Taiwan, where we're at now, there's volcanoes. And those volcanoes can erupt, right? So it's this kind of process. It's a geyser coming out of the cracks. His creation, the colors, the sounds, the variety, gushes his revelation. And that's where we see the light through those cracks. And listen, here's the other thing David suggests. It speaks, hey Samantha, good to see you, honey. Shabbat Shalom. It speaks in every language and in no language. And this is really just the beautiful thing about Hebraic literature. David says it speaks in every language, nature speaks in every language and in no language. He says without speech, without a word, without their voices being heard, their line goes through all the earth and their words to the end of the world. George Washington Carver said, "I love to think of nature as an unlimited broadcasting station through which God speaks to us in every hour if we only tune in." That's so true. So let me ask you this. Where at in nature, and let me see this in your comments, do you sense God in this way? Where's your place? When I used to live in New York and work at a church, Mondays was our day off, and I would take my sons to this place called the Fortress of Solitude. I called it the Fortress of Solitude, and it was in Central Park. And it was kind of this hidden, unknown place. I'm sure some people knew about it, but it was like this little cave almost where it had a little waterfall. Yes, it was in Central Park, and you would climb down the rocks and the kids could play, and it would be close to the water, and it was quiet and the birds would sing. You can find these places anywhere. Even if you have a garden somewhere, or even if you're in an apartment and you have a lot of plants, and you turn on some sort of birds and water sounds, and you look at plants. But it's best to actually get out into a park, or go to the beach, or go on the mountains, or take a walk wherever you find nature. David says clearly, we see God. So where is it that you have that's that spot? It says, in them, David says, in them, he places a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom from the bridal chamber, with delight like an athlete to run his race. It rises at one side of the sky, it circles around to the other side, and nothing escapes its heat. So David writes in these words, God pitches a tent. Again, these lines come from heaven, and pitch a tent. And then as morning comes, the sun bursts out like a bridegroom emerging from his wedding chambers. And so beaming with light and love from his night with his new bride. And certainly for those of us who have had that connection, we know that feeling of you're just fully alive. It's the first time of intimacy, of sexual intimacy, and you are just fully alive. And this is how the bridegroom comes out of his tent after his first night. And then he switches to the image of an athlete running a race with, and if you've ever had a sort of athletic challenge and you're just amazed at your body and the energy and what that feels like, this is what David is connecting, this kind of joy. The sun comes out in this way and goes down every day, comes up and it goes down every day, revealing messages to all. And the sun also serves all who live on earth. And this is something important to understand here. This language here of nature and the sky and the sun, it serves everyone. It's not some secret, inclusive, or exclusive message. It's inclusive. Everyone is invited to witness, to share, to experience God in nature, no matter where you live in the world. It serves all who live on earth. Nothing, David says, is hidden from its heat. So God shines this gift onto everyone. It gives life to everyone. Vitamin D gives life to us. And it's so funny that people have grown to fear the sun when in fact life is in it. Plants, the seas, animals, everyone needs the sun. Remember, the present creation is adversely affected by the greed of mankind. So I just want to qualify this a bit. God actually created all things good, but not everything you see in nature will be a true reflection of God, unfortunately, now, this time where we live. Whether it's climate change or animal behavior change or viruses and bacteria, this is a perversion of creation. So, but we should not say God is absent or uncaring or cruel because man has corrupted earth. In fact, earth and all of his creation still has an innate inclination towards turning, towards healing. And that is found everywhere. And we see that as much as we're passing laws that don't take care of animals in nature, we still see in places around the world where people have said, no, we're going to plant trees, we're going to protect this forest, like places like Costa Rica. It's reverting back because God has created in nature's DNA the inclination to heal itself if we'll just support that healing process. Phoebe says they have to keep their minds open and see it. Hey, Iris, great to see you. Shabbat shalom, honey. Absolutely, Phoebe. You can find God in all he has created. Watching the sun rise or set and the seasons turn, staring up in awe at the stars, walking in nature, connecting to the earth's resonance with our bare feet, delighting in God's animals, even eating a piece of fruit. They all connect us to God. And Phoebe makes an important part about opening our eyes and being mindful to this. It's easy to check out in our responsibility of stewardship on the earth if we don't see God in creation. If instead we look at creation as some sort of resource to make money off of. And that's not how it was given to us. We're actually here to serve the earth, and in turn then the earth feeds and nourishes us. But when we disconnect, that's when we can use it as a resource and not care about it. But when we open up and see, as Phoebe is saying, that's when we become stewards. Often the best way to approach a problem, so again, we're talking about those who have chosen to leave the Western church model paradigm and places where they can find God, and they're concerned, they're not losing faith, they're not losing relationship with God, they're leaving an organized structure. And so where is it that they find God? And that's our question. Oftentimes the best way to approach a problem is to turn it on its head. So let's ask this question from another side. Is it possible to lose God when you leave an institution, when in fact he's everywhere? And what shall be our response then when we find him in nature? Well, the first thing that we see is that we should consciously keep on connecting to him. So this, what David describes and where he is in nature, we need to be mindful and continuous and constantly connect to him through nature. And we've talked about in other teachings other ways we connect with him as well, like in community with people. So what's our response to finding God in this creation? What will our natural response be? Well, let me ask you this. Can you build a house without materials? Can you compose a song without the inspiration of other songs? We are not designed to be creators in a vacuum. All creative expressions come from something. The potential of creativity itself is a something that contains the possibility of another something. So our creative response to finding him in his creation is for us to be creators. When we observe harmony in nature's ecosystem, it seems to call us to create a world that reflects and lives in harmony and synchronization with the rhythm of the natural world, to bring restoration. So we not only sense God, as David says, see God in this wordless words of nature that's everywhere, but then that inspires us also to be the kind of creators in this earth, to bring restoration and reconciliation and beauty into the world as God has designed. So we can lose church and find God in nature. We're going to close this time with the lighting of the Shavuos candles. And traditionally, the mothers light the candles which connect us to the Sabbath light of peace and joy and unity. And then she symbolically encircles her hands 3 times around the candles, which is a gesture that welcomes in the Sabbath. May we see the light bursting from the cracks in nature, and may we be inspired to create the world He intended. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.